How's it going, everybody, and welcome to episode 265 of Master My Garden podcast. Now, this week's episode, and actually one of the episodes coming up in the coming weeks, will have a sort of a similar theme. So, here in Ireland, we have National Tree Week, which runs from Sunday, the 9th of March, through to Sunday, the 16th of March. And every year, I suppose that highlights the importance of trees, obviously, from a biodiversity perspective, but also in terms of, future climate change and so on. It also, highlights everything that's good about trees, I suppose, over that week. And there's lots of different events going on across the country. That event is, as I say, National Tree Week. It's run by the Tree Council of Ireland, and I'm delighted to be joined by the President of the Tree Council of Ireland, Cormac Downey. Cormac is also the tree officer with Fingal County Council, so there's a sort of a few avenues that we can go down here. As well as that, we spoke to one another at the GLDA conference last weekend, which obviously we mentioned on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, and that event turned out to be really good. There was some fascinating stuff in that. We might delve into that a little bit. If not, I'll definitely be sort of covering it on a future episode. So things in it that we can all be thinking about. So, but to start chatting initially about the Tree Council and National Tree Week, Cormac, you're very, very welcome to Master My Garden podcast.
Thank you, John. Thanks very much.
Yeah, so lots going on. As I said, we bumped into one another at the event the other day, which was brilliant, and we might chat about that later on. But the Tree Council of Ireland, obviously a very important body. You're the current president of it, and I know that various people do different stints in the role. So you're there currently, and yeah, it's an important job, I guess. And
Yeah,
the week coming up is a hugely important week for you guys.
yeah. Well, this is a really busy time of year for us, particularly leading up to Tree Week.
Yeah,
Tree Week itself is sort of at that stage has been organised, and it kind of hopefully
yeah,
flows and works well. But yeah, yeah, I'm currently president. Uh, Tree Week, it's been running. The Tree Council set up in 1985, and I think the first Tree Week we had was 86, so we're coming up to nearly is it the 30th anniversary.
wow,
um so that'll be kind of what we will be kind of concentrating on next year.
yeah, yeah,
But yeah, Tree Week, it's really, it's all about promoting trees. That's a very basic kind of objective Tree Week has. But what we're trying to do, encourage people to get involved with tree planting. And actually, one of the important things that I'd like to say along with that term, tree planting and establishment.
yeah.
I think that's because I like to think we've moved on from that just tree planting, because tree planting is it's a you can do it in 10 minutes done, but that's really only the first part of it. We have to make sure trees
Get
establish,
Mm.
and they're there for the long term. So
Yeah,
that's what we're about. Encouraging people to go out and visit woodlands, appreciate trees for what they are, the benefits they give us. And again, that phrase, tree benefits, it gets thrown around a lot, but I
yeah,
think it really is what fuels everything we do. So that's really important to understand and appreciate the benefits trees do give us.
yeah.
And I think, yeah, there's that, what they call is the biophilia hypothesis, where it's that kind of innate need for people to be in and around kind of greenery, wildlife, that kind of thing. And it's as basic as just enjoying a walk in the woods.
Yeah.
But yeah, Tree Week, we try and promote trees and what they do for us as much as we can.
Yeah. And I suppose there's a few things there, obviously. Just to go back to one of your very first points there, the planting of the trees is I suppose it's the one that the picture goes in the paper, the politician or the business owner or whatever it
Yeah.
is. And I think that is a really good thing to point out, that it's not just about that act of sticking it into the ground. It is about those first, and listeners to the podcast will know we talk a lot about bare root planting, and we talk about the importance of those first 2 years.
Yeah,
Because you're talking about trees going in with
absolutely.
small root zones and needing some nurturing for the very start. Because if a seed falls from a tree in a forest, the natural system is there to germinate that seed. But if you plant it in the middle of a park, it's a different environment, and it's about nurturing
Absolutely.
that tree at that stage. So that's a really valid and important point.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it plays along with that idea, as you just mentioned it there, that the photo op, and it's great, and that's really important. And it's hugely a massive part of it, but it is just the first part, and that picture advertises it to people. But it kind of, for me, it kind of goes along uh, these planting a certain amount of trees, these targets,
Yeah,
numbers, plant 1 million trees here and there, which is all well and good, but we have to be able to have a plan in place that where those trees we plant are there in 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years time.
yeah,
So really concentrating on getting the right tree in the right place, and getting it established more so than just planting 100 trees here in this corner and walking away, which has happened in the past. And I mean, 100 trees in a corner of a park or a field somewhere, um, does take a lot of looking after in the first 2, 3 seasons.
yeah,
But if you invest in that time, and it doesn't have to be an awful lot of time, but it does, it is essential. It happens just for the first 2 or 3 seasons, and once that root system's in place, uh, they can look after themselves more or less at that stage. But it's just
yeah,
getting them over that first hurdle, and just in, and it's the unseen work. And there's no pictures taken of that.
yeah,
Someone
yeah.
replanting or beating up or take getting grass away from the stem, all that kind of stuff. It's
Yeah, there's initial couple of years of
yeah,
of
and
ten of tending.
but to be honest, that for me that's the nicest bit,
Yeah,
really.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Because yeah, that's the bit where you're ensuring that this tree that has gone into the ground on day one as a whip or even as a bigger tree, you're
Yeah,
ensuring that it becomes the fullest of its potential, which is, a carbon capturing wildlife haven. Um, from an amenity perspective, it fulfills it, and for all the reasons, it fulfills its potential. And those first 2 or 3 years, that's, as you say, that's the
yeah.
important bit, and that's actually the nice bit, because you're ensuring that it does get a chance to
Yeah,
to
yeah, and
realize its potential.
you're out there, and you're touching them. You're seeing
Yeah,
how well they did in the first year and all that, and you see their progress, and
yeah,
you see how well you're doing with them, and really that's sort of what Tree Council is about. It's just getting people to that stage, and
mm,
once you've got them people to that stage, they can go on as well,
yeah.
do their thing. So
The council you said was set up in 1985 or six, was it? 85 or is it six?
85,
Yeah, so
85,
85.
yeah, at
So
the end of 85, yeah,
yeah, so at that time there was the original people that started it. There clearly must have been some reason at that stage. Obviously, we'd lost a lot of forestry in Ireland over the years. But I would imagine that in 1985 it probably wasn't, the worst was yet to come, let's say, in terms of deforesting areas. Or am I
yeah.
right in saying that? And
No,
where would we be now? Like, 1985 to today it's quite a while. So did we see the worst at any stage, and are we progressing back upwards now, hopefully?
well, it depends on how you measure it, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, you measure these things. I mean, our tree cover is well documented as being ridiculously low. Over the last 100 years.
Mhm.
It has slowly crept up in the last 10, 20 years, I think, hasn't it? Which is good. Now, a lot of that people would say would be conifer plantations.
Yeah.
But as I said, it depends on your metric. But yeah, it has improved, but it has improved from a very bad place. So,
Hmm. Yeah, yeah,
so if you compare it to a European country, we're still way off, way
yeah,
off.
yeah.
Um,
And I think you're right in saying that in that yeah, a lot of the plantation that we might be talking about now as being, forestry areas is
Yeah,
single variety conifer type species. And strangely
yeah,
enough, I was up the west of Ireland a few weeks ago. I mentioned it on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, and you just see endless areas of those trees just flattened after that storm. There's
yeah,
very little now. Obviously, the storm did damage to your hardwood trees and your native trees and all of those things. But to see it, when you have a single tree like that across such a big area, there's not much chance when something like that happens because there is no filtering and so on.
yeah. Yeah. Look, it's. I mean, I've no beef with forestry. Forestry is a really important part of our country.
Yeah,
It should be even bigger. That has its own problems at the moment. Um, but forestry is not a bad thing. Forestry is a good thing.
yeah,
I think what people, and it's amazing. People, I think, just jump straight to the Sitka spruce, and once people say that, hackles go up on one side, and does this lines are drawn straight away.
yeah, yeah.
But it's it's for me, it's nothing to do with the tree. If anything, it was possibly the way it's the system that's used to grow them. So change the system slightly, or continuous cover forestry, whatever. But it's not the tree that Sitka spruce is a fantastic tree. It for what it
Hmm.
does, it's absolutely amazing. Um, but I think this the system could be looked at in which it's managed or how it's grown. But you're right. I mean, if having a single species, you have all your eggs in one basket, especially when it comes to pests and diseases. So that's where diversity is always encouraged in general. But again, forestry is slightly different because it's a
Yeah,
crop. So
yeah.
you have to. It's not just we'll all plant native trees and we'll all go home happy. That's because that it's not there. I mean, we have plantations, we have a forestry industry for no matter how good or bad it is, but we have a forestry industry, and that should be invested in, I think, and pointed the right way. Um, but I think it's the forestry in its as a timber production has its own place.
Yeah.
Um, but diversity in general is a good thing.
Mhm.
Um, And again, we could throw in the debate about native, non-natives. If you want, and I think it's accepted that diversity is good. It's necessary for all sorts of reasons. But again, it comes back, I think, to whether the right tree in the right place, is for the right reason. And I think that term, right tree in the right place, again, is another thing that's thrown out, left, right, and center all the time, and it kind of gets diluted. The meaning of it gets because it just goes in one ear out the other. It's used so often, but your right tree in the right place for the right reason. I think everything how you approach a planting site has to be um, sort of kind of directed by why are you planting? What is it you're planting? Why are you planting it? And your species choice will come from that, and that has to fit in with your site, with your soil, all that. And then you start picking what could go in, and you come up with a list of potentials. And I think it's wrong just to say that list has to be native, because once you do that, that list gets really small,
Yeah.
and your palette is very small. And we don't have many native trees really.
Mhm.
Um, so that has to be taken into account. Now, if you have an objective for a site in regard to managing it or why you're planting something, that has to kind of inform your species choice. Um, so there's lots of variables in this, and I mean, you could make it very long-winded and very complicated, but just don't put the wrong tree in the right place,
Yeah,
I think.
yeah. I think that's kind of a regular gardening theme as well. It's a famous one, right plant, right place. Like it makes perfect sense. The the native, non-native, I suppose, always stirs up debate, and as you rightly said, it's not necessarily the right debate. So
Yeah,
we
yeah,
have officially 28, I think, native species of tree, and clearly now there's way more than that in the country, and
mm,
you can't just rely on the 28 in certainly in modern times. Maybe all those years ago that was what was working for for biodiversity and so on. But it has changed, and it is changing even further. We heard that Saturday at the talk. It was
yeah,
very obvious that there's changes coming and have been happening over time, and there's an
yeah.
adaptation required in the tree species on the basis of that.
Yeah, no, the world has changed in the last 50 years. I mean, it's as they call it, the global village. There is no, I mean, we have, we've uh, spores, floating over from Europe. We have we have trade, um, lorries coming, European Union.
Yeah,
There's no borders anymore within
yeah,
Europe. So there's free flow of goods and plants through that area. So you look how big Europe is from one side to the other, uh, which is how we got ash dieback in here. That was brought. Most of our pest and diseases are actually brought in.
hmm,
They did very very rarely would spread naturally now because everything's speeded up, and I think you just made that point about adaptation. It's just the rate of the speed of things happening. Nature can't keep up.
yeah,
If things do as it should do in nature, things move slowly. Trees can adapt, and that's what they have. That's what nature does. But we've
yeah,
just sped everything up to the nth degree, and we're picking up a container of trees over in Poland, something, and dropping them over Mayo.
hmm,
So
yeah,
we're yeah, that has to that, but that's life, and that's the way it is.
mm,
So I think we definitely do need to be aware of that, and have it as part of the conversation.
yeah. And like biosecurity is it's hugely important. And like one of the saddest things that we see at the moment is ash dieback. And that has come from the transportation of trees. It probably has come from a lack of foresight as to the potential problems. And I think we've probably seen something along the same lines in the last few years where, we had the acre scheme, which was a fantastic scheme in itself, in that you could plant all these native trees, but at the time of it going live, there wasn't the
They
stock.
weren't there.
They
Yeah,
weren't there. So it
yeah,
was never possible to fulfill the demand from Ireland. Hence, there was a rewording of the document, and you could bring in your white thorn and so on from other jurisdictions. And there's the threat there with fire blight.
yeah,
So like on the one hand, and I think it's a fair comment, we're saying native, non-native is a kind of a debate that's not necessarily live anymore. We do need that diversity in trees, but we also do need to have a bit of foresight on things that could cause us potential problems. And as you say, if you pick up a trailer load of plants in Poland and drop it somewhere, you need to know exactly where we're coming from, what
yeah,
potential
yeah,
problems are there, and what potential problems could that bring to us. Obviously, there's going to be, if there is benefits as well, and you have to weigh up the pros and the cons. But when it comes to something like ash dieback, it's it must be, well, it is. It's an extremely sad thing. But for somebody on the tree council, that must be sad, worrying, and
yeah. Of course.
frustrating, I would guess.
Well, look, it's a tree off that list, that native tree list that you can plant anymore, or
Hmm,
um, which is a small list. So the list is getting smaller.
hmm,
Um, but I know the department have some good control set up and procedures and all that, but it's still we're still the global village, and movement will happen.
hmm,
And it's just part of life. And I know, I mean, there's a list of potential threats just sitting there waiting to come in.
hmm,
Um, I mean, Emerald Ash Borer, which is it's America famous, mostly, but it in Russia as well at the moment, and that's not a million miles away from us, really. And if that something like that gets in, whatever is left of the 10% that's left of our ash population,
Right.
absolutely wiped.
And where are we at with ash dieback? So the evidence is clear to see everywhere.
Yeah,
And here and there I hear reports of some trees coming back, some trees not as susceptible as others. And I know there's work going on, breeding programs and different things going on to try and sort of breed resistant strains. But
yeah,
and certainly even here like I live on a farm, and there's certain areas that are just decimated within the existing hedgerows. These are not trees that were planted or bought in. They're there
yeah.
as long as I know that, for years and years, and they're dying, but not everywhere. And so, where is that at now? Is there actual research that shows there's resistant strains, or is it a case that some are just slower to pick it up, or where is that conversation at now, or do you know?
I think it's tolerance more than resistance, because I think every every ash has the potential to get it, first of all, and
Right.
nearly every ash will. It'll be exposed to it at some stage. They reckon at the moment it's roughly speaking 10% will show tolerance. Now that doesn't mean that the tree is left perfectly, with no dieback at all.
Yeah.
But it will have dieback, but it will have halted it at some stage. So it'll stop the ingress of it, and it'll start to reform a crown,
Right.
hopefully in time. But the problem with that is, and this again, it's most of what I'm talking about here today comes from the lack of a tree understanding in this country. We've lost whatever we had. That's long gone. And when trees, because sorry, the reason I'm saying that is what's happening now. We're going to see hedgerows being decimated. Okay,
Hmm.
so someone's going to come in. There's going to be a tree possibly showing signs of ash dieback, maybe not. But the very fact that it's an ash tree, get them out.
Hmm.
That's happened. It's happened in England a lot in certain councils where their approach was kind of, I suppose, based on a resources thing. What's the cheapest way to deal with this? So just go in, just take out any ash tree that's a potential hazard. So any ash tree on the roadside, just take it out. Um, Now they've looked back at that system, and I think they've regretted it slightly, or a lot in some places, because there is that 10%
Yeah.
within the population that has that genetic tolerance.
Yeah.
And they are so important and valuable for
Mm-hmm.
repopulating those hedgerows that you've lost.
Yeah.
But what's happening now is contractors are coming in with machines and just taking that line of hedge
Yeah.
out altogether, on the basis or pretense of it's got ash dieback. Um, Now it's like, that's easy to say as well. But if you have a row of roadside trees, you have to manage them, uh, and you may be told that that's the cheapest way to do it. Just take them all out. Uh, no tree, no risk, sort of
Mm.
thing. But with that, we're losing hedgerows all over the country. We're losing a lot of ash trees that haven't been affected at all yet, so we don't
Mhm.
know what they're like. Ash trees that have been affected, but only slightly, they still have that potential to show tolerance and be able to fight back. But they're being wiped out en masse,
Right.
and that's a real problem. But as I say, this comes back to Ireland. We don't have a tree culture here.
Mhm.
Not like you look countries in Europe where we really don't.
Right. So in terms of, obviously there's the big picture, there's the government policy, there's agricultural policies and so on and so forth. So obviously Tree Week is very important when you look at it against the backdrop of things like this. Where can day-to-day gardeners listening to the podcast, people involved in community gardens, town councils, parks departments. Where can we get these wins, or what are the actions we should be taking? Obviously, plant a tree is an action, but what steps would you be recommending people take? So in a garden, looking for the right tree, and so on.
Yeah, look, it's exactly that, and each situation is going to be different.
Yeah,
And again, it will come from, why are you planting a tree? I think that's as important as anything, because you want to know, you want to have a reason for planting it first of all.
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
it's no use just let's go out and plant a tree and stick a few here and as I say, walk away. Have a reason for doing it. Um, do a little bit of research into it, which I always find really interesting actually. It's amazing what you can learn. Um, you have an idea of what tree you want there. Look it up, see will it suit, how big, what's its eventual size, what what's its attributes. And with little steps like that, you're building up your knowledge. Um, if you have a planting or a garden that does really well, and a tree will do well if it's picked right, and planted right. That in time will be seen by people around, and slowly, I think we look to build up that tree culture. Um, and it's based on an appreciation of what trees do, um, and an understanding of, as I say, why you're picking that tree. What do we want here on this site? Doing a bit of research, picking the right tree, and make sure that the tree's in good condition. And again, this I would, if you could look up the Tree Council website, there's lots of advice on this. But if you're going into looking at a plant before you buy it, what to look for. Or demand the best quality of stuff. Root systems are good; they're not pot bound. The trees are in good condition. Now, if you're buying something, you want it in the best condition it can be, and that'll give it its best chance of establishing. Um,
yeah,
so a bit of knowledge about, if you're looking at a tree in a pot, just knock the pot off it quickly to have a look inside what it's like.
yeah,
How long has that been in that pot? Are the roots starting to circle around inside? Just little things like that. Go pick a good tree.
mhm,
Suited to what you want. Uh, and if there's one piece of advice I give people, is don't be very careful when you're digging your hole that you have the hole depth correct. Don't plant it too deep. Loads of people plant trees too
yeah,
deep, and
yeah.
it's an absolute killer. At best they'll sit there for a couple of years, and they might maybe come back eventually, but you lose 6-7 years on it.
Yeah, without a doubt, that is one of the biggest mistakes that people make, planting trees and shrubs for that matter,
Yeah,
planting them too
yeah,
deep. So for anyone listening, if you're planting a potted tree, the level of the soil or the compost and the top of the pot, that goes at the
that's your
level of the
level.
ground. It's
Yeah,
not down a foot or down even 6 inches. It's level, and you're looking for the roots to grow outwards from there and downwards from there. And that's, yeah, you don't need to go down deep when you're planting them. Um,
no, no.
interesting, interesting point you made that we don't have a tree culture here. I think possibly there's a lack of I was going to say there's a lack of appreciation, but I don't think that's the right word. I think there's a lack of knowledge of what trees actually and do can
Yeah,
do and do over time. Um, so maybe, like, there's the obvious one that, that, as I say, the photo op or the advertising slogan, we're planting 1 million trees and we're locking in X amount of tons of carbon, and that is, you know somewhat true, but it's a small part of the picture in the overall sense. So maybe let's just talk about some of the benefits of trees, in a garden, in a park, in a forest. You know, from all from human health perspective, from the landscape perspective, from
mm.
biodiversity, from all angles. Let's just talk about all the good things that trees do.
Yeah. Well, I suppose the is it the fancy term now is ecosystem services. Um, what they give us. it's and what they give us more than than an individual will know, because they when someone walks up to a tree, they see different things.
Right.
Do you know? Um, First of all, it's the aesthetic. There's a lump of green there, basically. All right, the most advanced solar panel you'll ever come across.
Yeah.
Um, Oxygen. I mean, you can't get as basic as oxygen, which I think is important.
Yeah.
We all need it. And it you drill it down to its base level. I mean, that's why the planet is the way it is. That is why we are here. Um,
Hmm.
Oxygen. Uh, and that's why we are here in the form we are in at the moment.
Yeah.
But it's yeah. So that's a very basic provision. Um, Carbon dioxide, of course, taken out of the air. You've got I mentioned that biophilia hypothesis, where that feel good feeling you get when you walk in around trees or greenery.
Yeah.
Um, you look at trees in urban areas, trees in towns, shade, huge. It's hugely important. And it was during Henrik's talk there. He kind of touched on it, and it's maybe more a European thing, but it's getting more important here. During the summer, we get those spells of really hot weather. Basic. You go to Spain, you go to a car park. You won't be able to be no spaces left under a tree, because that's where everyone goes.
Yeah.
That's why. So
Yeah.
the shading is absolutely huge in some places. That flood water attenuation slows down rain, and that's another part of our the weather we are getting and we're going to get in the future, is those heavier extremes. It's sort of, in a way, that's really hard to manage for the future, because you've got uh, weather where you're going to get extreme flooding, and then extreme drought.
Yeah.
And people are supposed to pick a tree that can grow in extreme flooding and extreme drought,
Hmm.
which which is hard. But um, they do. If you look at it in a very simple way of seeing that, actually, is after a rain shower. If you look under a tree, if it hasn't rained too much, you'll see the road. The road is wet except under the tree.
Yeah.
The tree is dry. Where has all that rain gone?
Hmm.
The
Yeah.
the the leaf area has taken it up. The air, the bark, everything has just held on to that for a little bit longer than it would normally do. And I think in built up areas where you got that hard surface, where there's no drainage at all, it's just this big splash rain comes, nowhere it can't go anywhere, because all the concrete hard surface, and that's rushed into drains, into rivers, and that's how you get your flooding events. So trees do slow that down. Um, Health, there's been a lot of research has gone into the to kind of measure the benefits of health. People who've just undergone operations, their recovery time has improved by X amount. But if they have a view of a tree out their hospital window, there's been a lot of research done on that.
Yeah.
I think that came from the UK NHS kind of research. But so the facts are there, the figures are there.
Yeah.
It does improve people's recovery. It lowers all sorts of you know young people with ADHD. It helps. It calms people down. It produces the chemicals in our body. Um, Relaxes people. Does then you can say a treed area in an urban space around houses will increase property values.
Yeah.
Again, the research has gone into that, and I've seen anything between 8 to 15% on a property due to a treed location.
The health is a massive one, and it's one that, again, in Ireland we don't necessarily have the the in-house research. But as you rightly said, the NHS have done research on this. I have seen the overall top line data on that, but and it's fascinating. But I read something last year. It was quite an in-depth article about forest bathing, which is becoming popular now. And when you mention forest bathing, a lot of people will throw their eyes up to heaven and tree huggers, blah blah blah. But this was a scientific paper that was produced on the benefits of it with actual doctors and actual hospital equipment and all this sort of thing. So it was a
Yeah,
proper research. It wasn't just people saying, "Well, I went there for the day and I felt a little bit better after it." It wasn't like that. This was, and it was the markers in so many different levels. The obvious ones, stress levels reduced, blah blah blah, but that had in turn effects on uh, the blood vessels and how they were open or closed, and
yeah,
inflammation reduced dramatically in certain types of patients, dramatically reduced. And as I say, it was a very in-depth. So even in your own locality, those are hugely beneficial. And I think we've lost a lot of those kind of, or some of those areas. Some of them are coming back, but where they are, they're an amenity, obviously to look at. But there's real health benefits there by being in those spaces. And yeah, I can't remember that, the who wrote that paper, but it was fairly heavy stuff, and
yeah,
it was unbelievable the difference from just being in the trees, touching the trees, grounding with the trees, and seriously impressive changes in people's biochemistry, basically, from being
yeah,
there.
yeah. No, it's. I mean, that's huge. Now I know. I think initially when the NHS started kind of looking into this, they were trying to save money, and looking at the population of a country. If you bring down recovery times, free up beds, all that kind of that
Yeah, yeah.
translates into real money, and it is huge, a massive effect on the economy.
Mm,
Absolutely massive. For something that people don't even consider, or if they do, just take for granted. I think a lot
mm.
of the time. Um, so it is something that's now, as you say, well backed up by evidence, um, that should add to our appreciation of what trees do.
Yeah. And I suppose that is the aim of Tree Week, isn't it? It's to give people an appreciation of trees. And
Yes,
I
get them
suppose,
out.
yeah,
Yeah, get them out. Go for, organize it if you're a load of school kids, and I think it's really important to get. That's quite easy to get young people because they just do it naturally. If you throw them into a load of trees, you'll let them off. You'll see them. It's something clicks.
yeah,
We've all done it. Climb around and look around the roots and mess about and jump around. And it's again, I think that's innate in what we how we are and what we do.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, it's really just get people out, look at what we have, go for a walk in your local community, a woodland somewhere, or tree, whatever it is. Just take a second or two, just have a look at them. You come across a mature tree, it doesn't matter care what it is, anything at all. If you just stand under it for a while and look up and see what's going on, look at uh, look at the wildlife that's evolved, that it supports, the habitat it creates, um, all little wounds, nooks and crannies, you know, the habitat during the day and at night. It's massive what it supports. Absolutely massive.
yeah. That's a really good point. Just before we move off that and start to talk about some of the events that are coming up, um, I suppose we mentioned the native non-native debate and how that's not necessarily the right debate to be having. That it's about the right tree in the right place. But if you look at, say, for example, an oak tree, and you might know the figure a little bit better, but from memory, it's like 100 and there's like 130
It's big.
insects, animals are a create the oak tree creates a home for 130 30 something life forms. Whether
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
fungi on the roots or bugs on the leaves, whatever it is. And it's a phenomenal amount of support. And so in that scenario, you're looking at an oak tree for what it can do over time, supporting biodiversity, as opposed to maybe another tree that doesn't have anything like that. So it's not a native non-native debate. It's what this tree can do for the area that you're going to put it into. I think that's kind of the point I'm trying to
Yeah,
make.
yeah, yeah. And it's see the and you may have an objective for why you're planting that tree, but you're going to get all these kind of subsidiary benefits along with them. Um, so it's really it's a win-win, you know. But it just comes back to, I think, people being just a little bit more informed in why they're planting that tree, and just plant it properly, look after it,
Yeah,
and enjoy it. It's
yeah,
really, and Tree Week is just about that, enjoying trees, getting people out, appreciating what trees are about. Maybe put on an event in your locality, or join in an event. And if we have for Tree Week, we have a dedicated website for Tree Week this year. If you go to our website, it'll throw you straight onto it,
yeah,
and on it there'll be a list of events there, where county by county, so you can look in to see what's in your area and see if you're able to join in. Maybe you can, please do. Or indeed, if you want to create your own event, or put on your own event, uh, you can add it in to the list of events on the website,
yeah,
which I would ask anyone who is planning events to add it in, because it'll give us an idea of what's going on around the country.
yeah.
And it's, again, that's just it, very small local community stuff, really. It doesn't have to be massive. It could be a walk, a talk, a planting, anything at all,
Yeah,
just to,
because I was having a look through the website before we started talking, and there's a wide range of events. So as you said, it's county by county, and I'll put the link in the show notes anyway. There's county by county of what's on. Not every county is on there, um, but there's quite a few there, and I know
yeah,
in Dublin, for example, there seems to be a lot of events on. There's the big one in the National Botanic Gardens with some good guest speakers. We might talk about that in a minute. But funny, as I
yeah.
went down the list, then I was looking local to me, so I'm in County Laois. There wasn't anything for County Laois yet, but there was something for Carlow and Altamount Gardens. And like, if you want to see trees and appreciate trees, that's a
Alton,
seriously good place.
yeah, yeah,
There's some, and again, native and non-native there, but beautiful specimens of trees, and you'll see you're fully mature, a lot of variety, and there'll be, that's
yeah.
definitely a great one. But then on the flip side of that, I saw, just by coincidence, there was a tree planting in Dunshaughlin in County Meath. So it's a tree planting on the green area, and it's in a housing estate, Ardlee, and I happen to recognize it because I have relations that live in that
Oh,
estate. And I was wondering why it was there, but when I read down, it was that they were doing a tree planting there, a tree planting event
oh,
there.
brilliant, brilliant.
Um,
Yeah.
so it's a
That's
variety.
exactly that. It's from just the very smallest single tree planting, whatever, all the way up.
Yeah.
And look, I lots of lots of counties haven't anything on the list of events of yet, but that's usually because, and this happens every year, not everyone puts their uploads their events onto
Okay.
that, so there will be stuff happening. So that's why whoever's listening to this before Tree Week, if they are planning an event, please do just add it to the list of events on the website, so
Yeah. And
you can
how does
just
someone
open
do
it up
that?
to people. It's very simple. Just go in and add as your event. It's kind of self-explanatory once you go
Okay.
on. Yeah,
Brilliant. Yeah. So you can load it up yourself, and
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, excellent. Um, I know in your day job, you're tree officer with Fingal County Council, and a lot of what you'll be doing is choosing trees, working with trees, deciding on
Well,
trees, planning for the future with trees, I guess. Um, and we heard
yeah,
last Saturday at the GLD conference how important trees are, but also how important they're going to be going forward.
absolutely. And it's that predicting what the weather is going to be like, or our environment is going to be like in 30, 40, 50 years time. I think that's the golden ticket. But how you do that, I really don't know. E-
Hmm.
Exactly. We're going to get a generic, as I said, extremes of weather more. It's going to be, like I heard, it's going to be colder, it's going to be hotter, it's going to be wetter, it's going to be drier.
Mm. Yeah.
So I don't know what you do with that.
So it's going to be a combination of all those
Yeah,
things, but for
but
shorter windows, I guess, which is kind of what
yeah,
we're seeing. If you look back over the last 5 years, we've had
yeah,
these intense droughts for varying lengths of time, from 4 weeks up to 9, 10 weeks at one stage. But we're also getting these every year seems to be
that
these
wet.
really heavy, rainfall events essentially,
Yeah,
and
and this is what's putting trees under huge stress and pressure. And trees, they can tolerate that for a couple of seasons.
mm,
But if they start getting hit, with their roots are in water for a couple of months of the year, and then they're drought, they have no water for another couple of months of the year. That will catch up on them. And any tree, especially if it's not in good condition, it's going to succumb.
yeah.
It's at least not going to do what it's supposed to do to the best that it can do. Um, so it's it. One of the other things if I'm talking to anyone about trees, what I encourage them to understand is roots. Roots are everything.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate because people can't see the roots, so they don't think they're there. It's out of sight, out of mind. Um, but if the rooting environment is kept in good condition, you give the tree its best chance to survive. And with all these extreme weather events, the tree has to be in optimum condition really to get through these. Because if it's any way stressed or unhealthy, throw a few seasons of those extremes in on it, and you'll lose them.
Mhm. Yeah. So, and something that I recommend, I'm not sure if it's something that you talk about, but at tree planting, I always add mycorrhizal fungi um, to the root zone. Like that's naturally occurring in forests. Again, I've spoke about it on the podcast quite a lot.
Yeah,
It's naturally occurring in forests, but if you're planting a tree on its own, it's not necessarily going to pick up that, and it increases the root zone by a massive 300%. And that's proven, and that's something that you can do to sort of safeguard, or it's almost like an insurance policy that a tree is going to get going and get going properly. So that's a good thing to do. Other than that, in terms of root, make sure that you're putting them somewhere again that's suitable for them. So if it's a tree that you know, likes free draining soil, then don't stick it in a boggy spot if it, or
yeah,
vice versa. So
yeah,
again, you're falling back to what you said at the start, Cormac, that it has to be the right tree in the right place for the right reason. Um,
yeah.
I think that's
Yeah, and everything actually does come back to that, really.
yeah,
Uh, but again, a bit of knowledge, like as you said, not to stick a tree that likes free draining into a big mucky site. I mean that's that can easily be found out by just reading a paragraph somewhere.
yeah, yeah,
Looking when you're looking up your tree. So it's just about informing yourself. It's not, you don't have to go in depth and study things. It's very basic. That information is in every tree book there is. That information will be there. So it's easily, it's easy to educate yourself that way
yeah,
if you don't know it already. It's not a big thing,
yeah,
but it's really important to get it right.
yeah, for sure. It's been really interesting chat. I know all the events, so all the events are coming up. I'll put the link for
Yeah.
in the show notes. Um, the website itself is 3week. It's 3week.ie, I think, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, and your own website, the Tree Council of Ireland's website, is there as well. People want to get
Yeah.
information about the charity.
There's loads of information there, and that link to the 3 week website is on our
Okay.
Tree Council website.
Yeah.
And there's on the 9th, on the opening, we have that panel discussion in the Botanic Gardens, trees for a changing future, and we have Eamon Ryan is going to be there. We have Keith Lampkin, who is from the Met Office, who's going to be a really important part of that discussion, actually, because he's going to give us a better picture of what's going to be,
Yeah.
which is kind of really important. And of course, we have Aina Nilauna there. Aina's done huge work for the Tree Council over the last number of years and continues to do so. So thanks to Aina for that. But that panel discussion, it'll be on Eventbrite, if anyone can join, please do come and join in. It'll be an interesting discussion.
Yeah, for sure. And then you'll see across the country then there's loads of other events. And if you're aware of any events and they're not up on the website, just
please do. Yeah,
log
on
them,
it.
because it'll put them in front of more people and so on. It's a fantastic opportunity to raise awareness of how beneficial trees can be. And as Cormac says, I guess, we kind of have lost sight of that in some cases, not everyone, but in some cases we've lost sight of that, and we kind of look at them as objects that are just there, but they're not doing much. But the evidence is there that they're hugely important to us.
Yeah, I think the problem is when a lot of people look at trees, they see danger.
Right.
There's a fear factor there, and that just comes from just a bit of understanding, really. All trees, if they're within a target, need to be managed to some degree. So it's again, that's just education, being aware of what trees can do, how trees grow, basic stuff like that. But and I know after the storm event we just had, where plenty of trees have come down, but that was hugely extreme. And if you look at the trees that didn't fall, so an awful lot of trees came through that storm.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny you say that, and I was going to bring it up earlier on, but I didn't. When you were saying that there was the approach in the UK of just taking out all ash along certain straits, and it was there was probably an education piece needed there, that there was 10% of these were good and they should have been left, and now they're sort of regretting it. But strangely enough, that storm has only been a couple of weeks ago here in Ireland. And recently a crew came down our road and they had been given instructions to cut anything within X amount of meters of transformers. And when my house was being built, there was a transformer put actually into my garden. It wasn't actually supposed to be, but when I came home from work one day, it was in my garden, which again, I have no big problem with. The power has to come from somewhere, no big problem with. But anyway, I have Betula jacquemonti, beautiful trees. They're mature. They're not going to get any bigger. And they fell within this meterage that this guy had told me they were outside, and his instruction was to cut them down by half. Now I wasn't here, and he said his instruction was to cut everything within 5 meters or whatever it was, 6 meters, 8 meters. I forget what the figure was, but to cut everything within 5 meters. And I said, absolutely no way are you cutting those trees when I'm not there. Because it's completely down to a knowledge thing, because those trees are fully mature. They're not getting any bigger. They're not growing any closer to the transformer, and they never will. When I planted them, I knew the transformer was there, and I knew they would never touch it, not in there ever. But this guy, I'm not blaming him. He was given instructions, but he was just coming. He was coming out to follow these instructions, blanket anything within X amount of meters, chop them down. And thankfully he backed down, because I would have been very upset if I had to come home to a tree.
But see, this is what's happening, and it all comes from a lack of knowledge.
Yeah,
it was that knee-jerk reaction, risk-averse reaction that we have in this country. Again, if you are knowledgeable and you manage your tree stock, you will take care of that end of things. But to come in and just wipe stuff out because it might fall, I mean, that's and this is what I'm saying. We're as far away from a tree culture as anything with that kind of carry on. It's because we started off talking about how low our tree kind of coverage is in this country, and all we're doing is getting rid of trees as quick as we can. Just through just a little bit of lack of knowledge, to be honest.
Yeah, lack of knowledge and a little bit of fear off the back of a storm that where there was damage caused.
But, and I get that. And but it's you can't then just say, right, any tree near a house, we just fell it. any
Yeah, it
tree
makes
grower
no
won't
sense.
fell it.
Yeah, it
No,
makes no sense.
absolutely no
Yeah, yeah,
sense.
yeah.
People react to that management. It has to be evidence-based sort of
Hmm.
management when you do. So whoever's looking at it knows what they're looking at. And if tree work needs to be done, to definitely get it done. But most of this tree work does not need to be done.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So 3 week coming up. I got to try keep that let out of my garden anyway. But aside from that, it's a hugely important week. It's a hugely important week to talk about the benefits of trees, to highlight the importance of trees, not just now, but for the future. And yeah, definitely look up any of the events. There's loads of them. They're in the various counties. Link will be in the show notes, or visit the Tree Council website or Tree Week website.
Yeah,
It's been
everything's on our website.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting chat. It's obvious that there's a lot of challenges, but I think there's also some real positives. And I think one of the biggest positives we can take from Tree Week, from conversations like these, is that the benefits of trees are just wide ranging, and they're hugely important. And as a society, we need to start recognizing that,
Yeah.
and I suppose appreciating them for what they are. So Cormac, it's been a really interesting chat, and thank you very,
No,
very
thanks,
much.
Sean. Yeah, thanks for listening to me.
Yeah. So that's been this week's episode. A huge thanks to Cormac for coming on. Some really interesting stuff there. Some worrying things when you look at it, uh, this lack of knowledge around trees and what they can do for us. But on the flip side, then you have great events like Tree Week, and I'll come back on it again. But last weekend's GLDA conference, to to hear the detail that particularly Henrik went into in relation to how trees can be so beneficial in urban environments, in terms of it may or may not be a thing for us in the future, but in terms of cooling areas, in terms of shading, in terms of slowing down the water, which is definitely something that's a huge factor in Ireland. And all of those things, trees have a massive benefit, and they are starting to become talked about more. And that's the aim of Tree Week. So it was really, really interesting chat. And that's been this week's episode. Thanks for listening. And until the next time, happy gardening.